to testify. Matthew Cooper and Judith Miller had refused. And the reporters had another problem. Just as the Plame affair had begun, in an unrelated case, a federal judge in Chicago had dropped a bombshell.
Judge Richard Posner, who's I just wanted to be clear that I've reread the Brandsburg case. And all you judges out there who have been saying for the last 30 years that Brandsburg provides some sort of privilege are wrong. There is no privilege in Brandsburg, period.
He caused a lot of trouble because he said, look, there's another way to look at it other than what all these lawyers have done. The reporter's got to testify.
Well, the other way to look at it is the court ruled 5-4. There is no privilege.
There's no privilege.
And Powell was just saying it'd be nice if Congress passed a law or somebody did something to protect
Powell's
reporters.
just blowing smoke.
Right.
Yeah.
And you had taken the smoke and made it appear to be real.
Right.
That's what he's saying. He called your bluff.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's a bluff, with all due respect.
Bluff or no bluff, Cooper and Miller were forcing the question. Would the courts back their decision not to testify?
My standard for cooperation was very high. It was different from other people's. Everybody has to make that call themselves, but I knew what I could live with and what I couldn't live with.
Judy Miller's attitude about this was that it was important for at least someone to stand up and fight, even if she wound up losing.
The reporters did lose. The Supreme Court refused to hear the case, and the final word was left with the lower court.
The appellate court in that case spoke directly, spoke very, very clearly, and said Brandsburg stands.
That's what they said. There's no ambiguity at all, that there is no protection, the Court of Appeals in Washington said, for journalists in situations in which a grand jury seeks information in good faith from a journalist, period.
Is it possible that given the bad facts in this case, and given the decision to, in a sense, fight this on principle, that in the end what you did was make bad law?
It's possible. It's possible.
You got the appellate court to reaffirm Brandsburg, which Goodale and your friend Goodale and allies have been trying to avoid a decision like that for decades.
Yeah. It just seems to me that there are some fights which have to be fought, and sometimes they have to be fought even if chances of winning are slight.
On July 6, 2005, Matthew Cooper headed into the D.C. District Court, where he would agree to testify.
What do we want? Free press! What do we want? Now!
Pearlstein and Time magazine had given Fitzgerald Cooper's notes.
Your reporter, Matt Cooper, he wasn't happy with your giving up his notes.
He disagreed with me. He wished that I hadn't done so. He viewed his conversation with Rove as a confidential exchange that ought to be protected. He disagreed with me about it. And I think he would have been prepared to go to jail himself.
It is a sad time when two journalists who are simply doing their jobs and trying to keep confidences and report important stories face the prospect of going to prison for keeping those confidences.
It's the most difficult decision I've had to make in more than 3 decades in journalism, and I say that with the understanding that lots of people whom I respect and admire would disagree with me.
Disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. I've talked about this with Norman. We have a civilized disagreement. Norman Pearlstein is in a very difficult political position in real life because he has to go to his board of directors who are not First Amendment nicks and maybe not even media people who know a lot about media and tell them that he's going to go in civil contempt. I think as a practical matter that is very difficult for him.
As usual with Jim, a little learning is a dangerous thing. I never went to the board. I made the decision on my own in my capacity as editor-in-chief of Time, Inc. In this particular case involving a grand jury, involving a question of national security, involving White House officials who were not traditional whistleblowers, but if anything were trying to undermine a whistleblower, and a situation where the name of the source was in our email and available to several dozen people within Time Inc., it seemed to me that as an institution we had no choice but to turn over our notes in this case.
Because the New York Times had not been in possession of Miller's notes, the government did not pursue a subpoena against the Times.
Competent justice will prevail on this one.
The decision to cooperate or not was up to Miller, and the paper stood by her.
Good luck, good luck.
Thank you.
Get him, go get him.
The underlying principle that we try to protect our sources, including against subpoenas before grand juries, is a good principle, but it's a very, very hard one to explain to the general public, given both the problematic nature of the reporter and the problematic nature of the leak. I think everybody wished that it was a cleaner case.
But do you ever really get to choose?
No, which is why we ended up, fighting this one as best we could.
When Miller refused to testify, she was shackled and taken out the rear of the courtroom into a waiting police van, where she was driven to the Alexandria Detention Center in Virginia.
Here's a reporter who's not well liked generally by the press establishment, who suddenly takes a position that is heroic to the press establishment.
Arianna Huffington, you wrote that Miller doesn't want to reveal her source at the White House because she is the source.
Well, it was so complicated that there were even wags inside the New York Times who speculated that Judith Miller never had any sources.
Miller's no fool. She understood the lesson of the Martha Stewart case. When you find yourself covered with mud, there's nothing like a brief stint in a minimum security prison to restore your old luster. What a nasty
Definitely
thing.
seems to be true.
Well, what a nasty thing to write.
There's definitely a group of people who felt that you were becoming a martyr, that you were doing this to make up for the problems with the WMD coverage.
I didn't feel that I had anything to apologize for with my WMD coverage. I knew why I was in jail, and I knew that I was in jail for a cause that I thought was essential to our profession, so I was very comfortable with the decision. But was it painful? Yes. Was it disappointing? Yes. Was it infuriating sometimes? Yes.
On September 29, 2004,